Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Adult Bible Class. Good to see you joining us this morning. In your student guide, the name of the lesson for today is God Judges Disobedience. I've supercharged it to Buried Treasure Causes Israel's First Defeat. Now, how is it possible that the covenant people of Yahweh can be defeated?
Carnal desires.
Carnal desires is one answer that we've had proffered. Anybody else like to get a little more specific? Complainer. What is it? Disobedience is the word we were looking for. You get those points today. Give Jeffrey a few points, but you get the bulk of the points. Disobedience. Disobedience to what? The Lord, or more specifically, the covenant. Remember the covenant, the agreement that they've got. They've got a deal with the Lord. Have you ever made a deal with the Lord? That's a covenant. Make sure you keep your end of the deal. So yes, there's going to be some disobedience, but do you think this is the only time anyone in the entire nation disobeyed the Lord? It's hard to think that this is the first time anybody has ever disobeyed the Lord. But this is going to be a special instance, and the Lord is going to make an example out of this incident. Because we know that later on, people are going to disobey the Lord, and they're going to even have idolatry in Israel. And the Lord is not going to there's not going to be this great catastrophe that happens in our lesson today. So this lesson is set by the Lord as an example to Israel. It's not always going to be like this. When someone disobeys, there's going to be a giant catastrophe. But in this case, the Lord is setting an example for Israel. So Israel is our story. When we see the stories about them, we think about the stories in our own lives. We see our own experiences in the stories of Israel. We can see ourselves. We can learn about ourselves. We can learn about the Lord in these stories. So in today's lesson in Joshua chapter 7, Israel is pressing on into the promised land. They've crossed the Jordan. They had that miraculous victory with Leo last week at Jericho, where the walls came down. There was no way they could penetrate the city, but the Lord brought the walls down so that they could walk straight ahead into the city and take Jericho. And so that was miraculous. They're on a roll. You would think when they got to the small town of Ai with only 12,000 people, how many does Israel have in their army? Over 600,000 men. Israel has over 600,000 fighting men, and they come to this little town called Ai, not our modern day AI. This is just Ai. And you would think this would be a piece of cake. In fact, they didn't even send the whole army. They only sent a group because they didn't need the whole army. Ai is so small, there's only 12,000 men and women and children in Ai. And it was an astonishing defeat, and it was shocking. And can you believe Joshua went to pieces over this defeat, and he lost his faith? And he started talking like Israel talked when they were in the wilderness. Lord, why did you bring us out here? Why are you going to kill us here? Why is this happening to us? And he has a breakdown. He has a meltdown in today's lesson. And the Lord is going to speak to him and encourage him and tell him what's going on. And he's going to say, there's sin in the camp. But this can't be the first time anyone in Israel has sinned. But the Lord, before they went into Jericho, the Lord gave specific instructions. And this guy right here with the beard, decided that he was going to disobey, but he didn't think anybody was going to know. But guess who found out? The Lord found out. He sees us. He sees everything we do. I learned this lesson as a child. I don't remember how old I was, but somebody, I don't know if it was my mother or Sunday school teacher, somebody got my attention and told me that God sees everything you do. And that had an effect on me. And God sees this guy with the beard today, and he's in his tent right here, and he's got some buried treasure in his tent. So we're going to have a lesson today about that. Joshua loses heart. The Lord tells Joshua that there's sin in the camp. You've got to get rid of the sin. And so Joshua does that. They go back to Ai, and there's a miraculous defeat of Ai, and Israel is now back on track, and they continue pressing on into the promised land, moving out the idolaters. Okay, so that's our lesson today. So let's look at some of the victories. We didn't cover these specifically, but I just want you to see how that Israel is not used to losing. In fact, they are undefeated coming into today's lesson. First of all, you can say that they defeated the Egyptian army by passing through the Red Sea and then obeying the Lord, obeying Moses, and then the water came back on the Egyptian army. So I didn't even cover that. But between the Red Sea, between Egypt and Canaan, here's the battles that they fought and won. First of all, they had victory over Amalek. That's the story when Aaron and Hur had to keep Moses' hands up. And as long as Moses' hands were up, they won the victory. And then they had victory over Arad, king of the Canaanites. They destroyed cities, multiple cities. Remember, they've got 600,000 fighting men. Victory over Sihon, king of the Amorites. They defeated him. They took control of his land. Victory over Og, king of Bashan. These are all in Numbers now, book of Numbers. Israel completely destroyed Og and his people. And then Midianites. They defeated the Midianites. They killed Balaam, which was a prophet that tried to prophesy against Israel. He couldn't prophesy against Israel because, this is a weird thing, but he had the Spirit of God in him that enabled him to be a prophet. And he couldn't prophesy by the Spirit of God against Israel. So what he did was he told them how to commit adultery or fornication with some of the idolaters, and that worked. Israel did that, and they had some problems there at Baal Peor. But eventually they did defeat the Midianites, and they killed Balaam, who had turned from a prophet of God against Israel. So they're on a roll here. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 if you want to count the Egyptian army, but they're on a roll. They're not used to losing, okay? Here's a quick overview. We'll get back to the battles in a minute, but here's a quick overview, let you see where we are in the book of Joshua. We've already covered the spies going into Jericho. Remember Rahab, then they crossed the Jordan. Leo told us last week that they had the first circumcision in the promised land, and then they celebrated the Passover at Gilgal. And then Jericho fell. Today we're doing the defeat and the victory at Ai. They both lost and won at Ai. How about that? Next week, Jay might talk about the Gibeonite deception, and he's going to cover some of the southern and northern campaigns. And there's also in Joshua a summary of the victories. That's the first half of the book of Joshua, and that covers all of the military battles that they went through to secure the promised land. But that did not drive out all of the idolaters. It was enough victory, it was enough cities, it was enough area for them to take hold in the promised land and to begin to possess it. But they did not eliminate every little pocket of idolatry. So there's still idolaters left in the land, and each of the tribes is going to have to deal with them individually or in small groups as they're trying to clear out the rest of these idolaters from the land of Canaan. The rest of the book of Joshua, the second half, talks about the dividing of the land, how they split the land up, which tribes got which areas. Also, the cities of refuge, which we're not going to cover in class, but if you come on Wednesday night in 2 weeks, I'm going to have a lesson about the cities of the Levites and the cities of refuge. So we'll do that on a Wednesday night. And then finally, Joshua's final words, and they're going to renew the covenant again. And then Joshua's going to die, and Eleazar, the high priest, is going to die, and then we're going to be in the third generation, okay? So Moses was the first generation that came out of Egypt, and then Joshua second, and then we're already getting to, when we finish the book of Joshua, we'll be getting into the third generation. And you know, the third generation is typically where things break down, right? Yeah, it's hard to pass down your values and everything to your grandchildren. You have a lot more influence over your children, but when it comes to your grandchildren, you don't have as much sway over them generally. And so whatever your values were sometimes tend to fade out on that third generation. So we'll see what happens with Israel. They're typical of us, so it's probably going to happen with them as well. One more thing I want to cover before we get into today's lesson, and that is the emphasis on the Ark of the Covenant. When they came through the Jordan River, it was the Ark of the Covenant carried by the priests that went out into the water that stopped the flow. Well, of course, it was the power of God that stopped the flow of the river. But symbolically, it was the ark going out into the water of the river, and then the water was stopped, and then Israel followed the ark and then went across the river. So God made a special point to put the ark at the front. And why was that? Why was that? It's just a box, right? Well, it's a special box that contains the covenant. The emphasis was not on the box. It was on the covenant, the written agreement that was in the box. That was the emphasis. And God showed them, when you go into the promised land, follow the covenant. Okay, the covenant's in the box. You're following the box, but really you're following the covenant. And then last week, when Leo gave us the fall of Jericho, what was it that went around the walls? It was the ark. In fact, let's read about that. Here we go. Now Joshua got up early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. Then the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark went on continually and blew the trumpets, and the armed men went ahead of them. And the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord while they continued to blow the trumpets. So this was the process as they were marching around Jericho one time a day for 6 days. There's the forward guard. There's the priest blowing the trumpets. There's the Ark of the Covenant. And then there's the rear guard. So everything is centered around the ark. The ark is the central feature. Why? Because it holds the covenant. Why is the Lord emphasizing the covenant? Because that's the only way they're going to survive in this hostile place called the Promised Land. Nobody wants them to come into the Promised Land. Nobody that lives in the Promised Land is welcoming Israel to come in. So there's going to be a struggle, and there's going to be a fight. All right, so the ark has taken this prominent position in crossing the Jordan and in the first battle. Momentum is on the side of Israel. They've crossed the Red Sea. They had these 2 water crossings that were miraculous. Now they're following this box that contains their agreement, their covenant with the Lord. And then let's see what else happened here at Jericho. Then on the 7th day, they got up early at the dawn of the day and marched around the city in the same way 7 times on the 7th day. And on that day, they did march around the city 7 times. And at the 7th time, when the priests blew the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." And that's not all he said. We usually stop right there. But today's lesson begins with the next verse. So this sounds glorious. Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. That's wonderful, because there's no way they could have fought to get the city. They didn't have any artillery. They didn't have any cavalry that we know of. All they had was infantry, and they're going up against a double-walled big city. But the Lord's going to give them the city. That's great news, right? But let's keep reading, because this is very important. But the city shall be designated for destruction. It and everything that is in it belongs to the Lord. Well, how about that? this pagan, sinful, idolatrous city belongs to the Lord? Well, that's what he said. This is Joshua talking. By the way, I don't know if you saw the new color, but that is Jordan Java. That color is called Jordan Java. It was on the intro today. That's for Joshua. So that anytime you see that Jordan Java, that's Joshua speaking. Does it show up well? Can you see it okay?
Yes.
I was worried about it being a little too dark. Okay, so only Rahab the prostitute, she'll never get away from that title, and all who are with her in her house shall live because she hid the messengers. But wait, but as for you, only keep yourselves from the things designated for destruction, so that you do not covet them, and take some of the designated things, and turn the camp of Israel into something designated for destruction, and bring disaster on it. So Joshua, I'm sure he got this info from the Lord. He says the city and everything in it is designated for destruction. He says this 4 times, designated for destruction. In different versions of the Bible, it might say different things. Your Bible might say is to be utterly destroyed. That's another meaning of this, designated for destruction. Another meaning of it would be accursed. Everything that is in the city is accursed. Another way of saying that is under the ban. It's under the ban. We don't use that phrase much, but that's another meaning of this, designated for destruction. It means that these items are consecrated to the Lord as an offering, like a tribute, maybe like a tithe, maybe like the first fruits. This is going to be Jericho's their first battle in the promised land, and the Lord is telling them, do not take any spoils. Okay, this is very common for a conquering army to take spoils from the ones that they've conquered. In fact, there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the deal. That's part of why you conquer another people, is to acquire their resources. But the Lord said, in this one, you take nothing. Everything is designated for destruction. Okay, got that plainly, saying it over and over. Plainly, all right, and a little bit more. But all the silver and gold and bronze and iron, that's the exception to the rule of everything except silver, gold, bronze, and iron, those are going into the Lord's bank account, the treasury. Well, where's the treasury? It's in the tabernacle. The gold, the silver, the bronze, and the iron go to the Lord. They go for whatever the Lord tells them to do with it in the tabernacle. All right? Everything else designated for destruction. So that's the setup for today's lesson. You ready to read, Jackie? Here we go, Joshua chapter 7, verse 1, and it already starts out badly. The anger of the Lord burns against Israel. All right?
But the sons of Israel acted unfaithfully regarding the things designated for destruction.
Why? Why? They wanted some of that stuff, right? I mean, they're killing all the people of Jericho. They're idolaters. God is using Israel to clear out idolatry out of the promised land. And there's all this free stuff laying around. The people that it used to belong to are dead. And somebody saw something. It's that guy with the beard that we saw earlier. They acted unfaithfully regarding the things designated for destruction. All right, what happened?
For Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, from the tribe of Judah, took some of the designated things. Therefore, the anger of the Lord burned against the sons of Israel.
The anger of the Lord burned against the sons of Israel, not Achan, all of them. The Lord held the entire group responsible for what Achan did. That doesn't seem fair, does it? Well,
Achan picked it up and didn't say anything about it.
Yeah, that's part of it. That's part of it. And going into this battle, given the fact that God gave specific instructions not to take anything out of the city, they should have all been reminding each other, don't take anything. We're going in, let's go. You ready? Don't take anything. That should have been the byword. Everybody should have been reminding each other, right? Don't take anything. Don't take anything. Don't take it. Remind them. But I don't think that message got promoted like that. I don't think they were all in on it. I think they heard Joshua say it and they said, okay, we'll see what happens when we get in there. I don't think they resolved before they went into Ai. I don't think they resolved completely. We're not going to take anything, right? You're not going to take anything, are you? No, I'm not going to take anything. Are you going to take it? No, I'm not going to take anything. It doesn't seem like they quite took it seriously enough. So now what? Now they're going to be defeated at the next battle. Notice they were victorious in Jericho, even though they took some of the designated things for destruction, right? They still won that battle, and I'm sure that guy, by the way, his name is Achan. We just saw that. His name is Achan. I'm sure he thought, whew, got away with it. Because he did make it out of the city with those items that he took, and he put them in his tent, and he buried them. I wonder if anybody in his tent asked him, what's that hole in the ground for? What's that pile of dirt? What are you doing digging over there? Maybe he covered it up with a rug, a nice Egyptian rug or something. I don't know. We don't have all the details, but for some reason, the Lord is angry with the whole nation. And they're going to lose their next battle at the tiny little city with only 12,000 people. They should have been able to just plow through Ai with no problem. In fact, they didn't even take the whole army because they didn't need it. Ai is so small. But they had an astonishing defeat at Ai. Why? Because they're no good without God. They're no good. Their army's no good. They're terrible. The only way they can win is with the Lord. All they've got is foot soldiers and some sticks and who knows what else. But they didn't have gunpowder, I can promise you that. That I can tell you. I'm going to try and start using that phrase. Y'all like that? That I can tell you? No? Famous guy is using that phrase a lot. Have y'all ever heard it recently? That I can tell you. They didn't have gunpowder, that I can tell you. They were no good without God. They couldn't defeat even the smallest town, Ai. They just weren't that good. They have to have the Lord or this is going to be a failure. So let's see what happens.
Now Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Beth-aven, east of Bethel, and said to them, go up and spy out the land. This
is kind of funny because remember, Joshua was one of the 2 good spies that came back out of the 12 that said, we can take the promised land. So Joshua's going to send some spies. Now, the spy is going to send spies. So
the men went up and spied out Ai, and then they returned to Joshua and said to him, do not have all the people go up. Have only about 2,000 or 3,000 men go up and attack Ai. Do not trouble all the people there, for they are few.
Remember, Joshua was a spy at one time. And remember, most of the spies did not agree with Joshua. So Joshua knows that spies are not reliable. Spies have not had a good track record in Joshua's life. Why did he believe these guys? I don't know. He knew that he had been a good spy. He knew that he had been a faithful spy when Moses sent him into the promised land. So for some reason, he believes these spies. And he says, okay, we don't need to send 600,000 people to a town of 12,000. We'll just send a few people up there.
So about 3,000 men from the people went up there, but they fled from the men of Ai. And the men of Ai struck and killed about 36 of their men, and pursued them from the gates as far as Shebarim, and struck them out on the mountainside. And the hearts of the people melted and became like water.
The hearts of the people melted. They lost their confidence. They lost their courage. They said, oh, no. It's not just that the smallest little town defeated them, but they have nowhere to go. They cannot back up. The only way they could get across the Jordan is if the power of God stopped the water again. And guess what? He's not going to do it. That was a one-way ticket across Jordan. They cannot go back, just like they could not go back to Egypt once they passed through the Red Sea. Now they can't get out of the promised land. They're trapped. And obviously, God has abandoned them because they lost 36 men. And what are they going to do? They lost their confidence. Now, look at this. Joshua's going to lose heart, and he's going to begin questioning the Lord.
Then Joshua tore his clothes and fell to the ground on his face before the ark of the Lord until the evening, both he and the elders of Israel, and they put dust on their heads.
Okay, they knew something was up. They knew something was wrong. They knew they were in trouble. Joshua was panicking now.
And Joshua said, "O Lord God, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan, only to hand us over to the Amorites to eliminate us?"
Wow, that sounds just like Israel when they were in the wilderness, right? Didn't they say the same things? Lord, why did you bring us out here to kill us with starvation and dehydration? Now they're stuck in the promised land, and God is not helping them, and they can't even win at Ai.
If only we had been willing to live beyond the Jordan. O Lord, what can I say since Israel has turned their back before their enemies?
Turn their back, meaning they ran away from their enemies. They had to leave, they had to run, they had to get away from there, or they would have had more casualties.
For the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land will hear about it, and they will surround us and eliminate our name from the earth. And what will you do for your great name?
Joshua is correct here, because once word gets out that Israel has been defeated, surely more Canaanites are going to come and surround them and eliminate them. They do not want Israel coming in to purge the area of idolatry. They like idolaters like their idols. Yeah, they don't want to give them up. They like their idolatry. And so Joshua is right, and the Canaanites are going to hear about this defeat at Ai, and they're going to come and surround them. They're going to eliminate them. And this is the same thing that Moses said, Lord, what about your name? What are we going to do when your people are destroyed and the whole earth knows that God wasn't strong enough to bring his people into the promised land like he promised? Now the Lord's going to answer Joshua.
So the Lord said to Joshua, "Stand up. Why is it that you have fallen on your face? Israel has sinned, and they have also violated my covenant, which I commanded them. And they have even taken some of the things designated for destruction, and have both stolen and kept it a secret. Furthermore, they have also put them among their own things. Therefore, the sons of Israel cannot stand against their enemies. They turned their backs before their enemies because they have become designated for destruction."
Oh boy, he warned them. He said, if you take the things designated for destruction, you will be designated for destruction. So God says the whole nation is now designated for destruction. He was right. Joshua was right. The Canaanites are going to come and surround them and eliminate them unless they take corrective action.
I will not be with you anymore unless you eliminate from your midst the things designated for destruction. Stand up, consecrate the people, and say, "Consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, because the Lord, the God of Israel, has said this. There are things designated for destruction in your midst, Israel. You cannot stand against your enemies until you have removed the designated things from your midst."
All right, so God plainly tells them this is the problem. This is how to correct it. You've got to get rid of those things designated for destruction, because as long as they're in the camp, the entire camp is designated for destruction. He said it over and over again. All right, so the Lord continues with Joshua.
"So in the morning you shall come forward by your tribes, and it shall be that the tribe which the Lord selects by lot shall come forward by families, and the family which the Lord selects shall come forward by households, and the household which the Lord selects shall come forward man by man."
This is the first time we've seen this selection by lot, I believe, in our story of Israel. It's interesting. Why didn't the Lord just tell Joshua who it was? He's telling him all this other stuff. He's telling him why they're losing at Ai, and he told them what to do at Jericho. Why doesn't he just say, it's Achan, go get Achan, it's Achan, it's Achan? But he didn't. He said, we're going to parade everybody, and everybody's going to see who it is, and we're going to designate the tribe and the family and the individual, because this is affecting everybody. The Lord is making a big lesson out of this. It's not a private thing. It's out in public, and the Lord is exposing it because he doesn't want to have to deal with this again. He's trying to save these people, right? He doesn't hate them. He loves them. He's trying to save them. He's trying to show them how to live and survive in this hostile area that they're trying to take over. So he's going to make an example out of this.
And it shall be that the one who is selected with the things designated for destruction shall be burned with fire, he and all that belongs to him, because he has violated the covenant of the Lord, and because he has committed a disgraceful thing in Israel.
All right, so that's the plan. And now Achan is going to be selected.
So Joshua got up early in the morning and brought Israel forward by tribes, and the tribe of Judah was selected. So he brought the family of Judah forward, and he selected the family of the Zerahites. Then he brought the family of the Zerahites forward, man by man, and Zabdi was selected. And he brought his household forward, man by man, and Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, from the tribe of Judah, was selected.
He's chosen, okay?
Then Joshua said to Achan, my son, I implore you, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and give praise to him. And tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me.
So Achan answered Joshua and said, truly, I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel, and this is what I did. When I saw among the spoils a beautiful robe from Shinar, that's Babylon, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold, 50 shekels in weight, then I wanted them and took them. And behold, they are hidden in the ground inside my tent with the silver underneath. So he's going to give it up. He's going to give up the booty that he took. It's buried. He thought it was a secret. He's opening up now. He confessed. Confession is not the same as repentance. We hope that he repented. He did confess. He did not hide it from Joshua, as Joshua said. But Achan's selfishness and his lust for free stuff caused 36 soldiers to die, and that affected 36 families, potentially, 36 wives, 36 sets of children, possibly, 36 sets of parents. It affected a lot more than 36 people. Not only that, but the whole nation has lost their faith and confidence. They know that God is not with them. They know that they cannot stand against the Canaanites because they're weak and they're small and they have no protection. They're in tents. They have nothing to protect themselves with. And the Lord is going to make an example out of this. But Achan took the silver. Remember what the silver and the gold were? What were? Somebody tell me.
Treasure.
They were to go to the treasury of the Lord. He stole from God's bank account. Hey, not the one you want to steal from. Actually, you don't want to steal from anybody, right? But certainly not out of God's bank account. Can you imagine that? Now, the garment, that was to be burned, right? The garment was the Babylonian garment from Shinar. That was to be burned. So it was just going to be burned anyway. Why couldn't he take it? It would look cute on him, I'm sure. You know, he could once he gets his inheritance in the promised land, put that jacket on and wear it around whatever town he's in, you know. But the gold and the silver, that came from God. That was destined for the Lord. All right, so what's going to happen? Achan and all his possessions are brought into the valley.
So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent, and behold, it was hidden in his tent with the silver underneath it. So they took them from inside the tent and brought them to Joshua and to all the sons of Israel, and they laid them out before the Lord.
Can you imagine how embarrassed Achan must have been? And what about Mrs. Achan?
I'm thinking rolling pin upside
And his children, and maybe his parents were there. Oh, and all the cousins in the tribe of Judah. Judah was the biggest tribe. So he had a lot of relatives. Actually, the whole nation was related, but they laid it out before the Lord. Everybody got to look at it. That's what Achan took. The joy of stealing was gone. The joy of the hidden booty was gone. Then Joshua
and all Israel with him took Achan the son of Zerah, the silver, the robe, the bar of gold, his sons, his daughters, his oxen, his donkeys, his sheep, his tent, and all that belonged to him, and they brought them up to the valley of Achor.
Whew, everything that he touched, basically, they brought it together. Israel, okay.
And Joshua said, "Why have you brought disaster on us? The Lord will bring disaster on you this day." And all Israel stoned them with stones, and they burned them with fire, after they had stoned them with stones. Then they erected over him a large heap of stones that stands to this day, and the Lord turned from the fierceness of his anger. Therefore, the name of that place has been called the Valley of Achor to this day.
The Valley of Disaster. It was a disaster for Achan and his whole family, even his animals. And it was a disaster for Israel. It was a disaster for those 36 soldiers and all their friends and family. It should have never happened, right? But he should have never where did it, well, we're going to get to that in a minute. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Okay, so now they've gotten rid of the cursed things. Presumably they took the gold and the silver and they brought it into the tabernacle. It doesn't say they did, but presumably they did, because it was destined for the Lord. And now in chapter 8, God says, okay, it's over. Everybody take a deep breath. Exhale. Here we go again.
Now the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear or be dismayed. Take all the people of war with you. Arise, go up to Ai. See, I have handed over to you the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. You shall do to Ai and its king just as you did to Jericho and its king. You shall take only its spoils and its cattle as plunder for yourselves. Set an ambush for the city behind it."
Notice that they didn't march around the city 7 times like they did at Jericho. It's going to be a completely different plan, right? We come to find out there's no cookie cutter formula for success. The only formula for success is do what God says at the current time. Okay? He's going to give them a completely different battle plan for Ai. And look at this. You shall take only its spoils and cattle. So they are free now to take the spoils of war, but not the people. They cannot take the people, okay? They're to kill the people, the idolatrous people, but they can take their possessions. How about that? If Achan would have just waited to Ai, he probably could have got some stuff there if he really needed to have more stuff. He couldn't wait, right? He couldn't wait to Ai. He had to get it in the first battle where the Lord said, don't take anything. He took just a little bit. If he could have just waited to Ai, he could have gotten him some spoils. He could have come away with some nice cattle possibly. All right, so the Lord says, set an ambush behind the city. They're going to do it differently this time.
So Joshua rose up with all the people of war to go up to Ai, and Joshua chose 30,000 men, valiant warriors, and sent them out at night. He commanded them, saying, "See, you are going to ambush the city from behind it. Do not go very far from the city, but all of you be ready. Then I and all the people who are with me will approach the city. And when they come out to meet us, as they did the first time, we will flee before them. They will come out after us until we have lured them away from the city. For they will say, 'They are fleeing before us just as they did the first time.' So we will flee before them."
Okay, a little bit more on this battle plan.
"Then you shall rise from your ambush and take possession of the city, for the Lord your God will hand it over to you. Then it will be when you have seized the city that you shall set the city on fire. You shall do it in accordance with the word of the Lord. See, I have commanded you.
Okay, so that's the plan. We're going to have a small group go out. Ai is going to see us. Ai is going to come out and start chasing us. And when they start chasing us, then the rear guard is going to come in from behind and take the city. And it worked beautifully and perfectly. Okay?
So Joshua sent them away, and they went to the place of ambush and remained between Bethel and Ai on the west side of Ai. But Joshua spent that night among the people.
Okay. Keep reading, please.
And it came about when the king of Ai saw them that the men of the city hurried and got up early, and went out to meet Israel in battle. He and all his people at the appointed place before the desert plain. But he did not know that there was an ambush against him behind the city.
Joshua, he's using subterfuge. Subterfuge, that's deception. He's playing a trick on Ai. Okay?
Then Joshua and all Israel pretended to be defeated before them, and fled by the way of the wilderness. And all the people who were in the city were called together to pursue them. And they pursued Joshua, and were lured away from the city. So not a man was left in Ai or Bethel, but they had all gone out after Israel, and they left the city unguarded and pursued Israel.
What a great plan. They actually managed to get all the men out of both of these two cities. All right, that's good. That was a good plan. It worked.
Then the Lord said to Joshua, reach out with the sword that is in your hand toward Ai, for I will hand it over to you. So Joshua reached out with the sword that was in his hand toward the city. Then the men in ambush rose quickly from their place. And when he had reached out with his hand, they ran and entered the city and captured it. And they quickly set the city on fire.
All right.
When the men of Ai turned back and looked, behold, the smoke of the city ascended to the sky. And they had no place to flee this way or that, for the people who had been fleeing to the wilderness turned against their pursuers. When Joshua and all Israel saw that the men in ambush had captured the city, and that the smoke of the city ascended, they turned back and killed the men of Ai.
All right, that worked beautifully like they had planned it.
Now when Israel had finished killing all the inhabitants of Ai in the field in the wilderness where they pursued them, and all of them had fallen by the edge of the sword until they were destroyed, then all Israel returned to Ai and struck it with the edge of the sword.
Remember, these are idolaters. These are people whose religion is immorality and child sacrifice. That's why the Lord is being so harsh on them. That's why the Lord is commanding Israel to kill them all. All right?
So all who fell that day, both men and women, were 12,000, all the people of Ai. For Joshua did not withdraw his hand with which he reached out with the sword until he had utterly destroyed all the inhabitants of Ai.
Okay, look at this.
Israel took only the cattle and the spoils of that city as plunder for themselves, in accordance with the word of the Lord, which he had commanded Joshua.
Woo! They did it right the second time. They did it right the second time in the second battle, actually. They only took what the Lord told them they could take. Now, later on, God's going to tell them they can take whatever they want to take. That'll come with time. But on these first battles, the Lord said, this is how I want you to do it. I don't want you to get greedy. Okay? And plus, I don't want you to be weighed down with a lot of stuff. We have a lot more battles to fight. You know, if they took too many items, they wouldn't be really prepared for the rest of the conquest that they had ahead of them. So, that's our lesson today. Let's look at this. This is how it applies to us. The Bible, it hits you, and it gets you, and it fits you. Achan's sin, look at this, began with him not being committed to obeying the Lord. Before he went into Jericho, he was not resolved, I'm not going to take anything. This is a key. You got to make up your mind before you're in a position of temptation. Once you're in a position of temptation, that's not a time to decide whether you're going to obey the Lord or not. You're probably not going to obey him. You've got to resolve it ahead of time. So Achan's problem was he did not resolve before he went into Jericho. I don't care what I see in there. I'm not going to take anything. That's where it began. Since Achan was not committed to obeying the Lord, then he saw, and then he wanted, and then he took, and then he hid it. But of course, none of it was hid from the Lord. Achan's secret sin caused all of Israel to suffer public humiliation and discouragement and delay, and the 36 men that died and all their friends and family were affected. Israel's victories have not come from their military power, but from the Lord's power. He's not going to let them win on their own merit and their own power. It's contingent on their obedience to Him. Look at this. Punishment and forgiveness are not mutually exclusive. I hope that Achan repented to the Lord, but he still had to be stoned and burned. Punishment and forgiveness are two different things, and you can have forgiveness from the Lord, but there still might be punishment. Sin has consequences. So just because you're being punished for your sin does not mean you're not forgiven. And just because you're forgiven doesn't mean you might not suffer punishment for what you've done. But the good news is God gives second chances. Now, Achan did not seem to have a second chance. Hopefully he repented. But he did give Israel a second chance. God does give us second chances. God bless you today. Thank you for coming. Next week, Jay will be here with chapter 11. I'm looking forward to God's promises end in rest. I bet he's going to say something about the Sabbath. Maybe. Maybe not. God bless you today.